The next video is going to be Nancy Powell. Nancy Powell is someone that I met actually in a situation that Sheila Simon mentioned. She, said that our conversations should try to be facilitated often in informal situations. And I happened to be attending a party for a friend of mine downstate. She was a high school speech and theater teacher. And at this party, I met lots of retired math and science faculty. And one of the math and science faculty I met was the woman who's featured in the next video. But before I get to her introduction, I just wanted to say that I asked my friend, why was it that you had all of math and science retired faculty? I was confused because you were in the speech and English department. And she said, oh, I don't really get along with those people. The math and science faculty are way more fun. So I thought that that was sort of interesting. The woman that I met at the party, Nancy Powell, was amazing. She was excited about her job, and as a retired faculty member, she was really involved in helping pre-service teachers and working with current faculty on trying to improve the teaching of math, especially with technology. She's retired from Bloomington High School. She is a leading author and received the Presidential Award for Excellence in the Teaching of Mathematics and Science. And she, as I mentioned, is really involved in teaching teachers about how to infuse technology in their teaching. So next up, we'll have the video roll-in from Nancy Powell.
For students to be successful in the workplace, I think they need to be able to reason mathematically. They need to possess problem-solving skills, and they need to be proficient with technology. Maybe they'll never solve two variable equations with two unknowns, but they need to know that equations can model real-life things and that it's possible to do that. They use that in engineering, manufacturing, programming, meteorology, and lots more occupations. Teachers and professors need to model a few things for students to pick up on those skills. They need to be professional and know and teach kids what it means to be professional in the workplace and in the classroom. They have to have a sense of responsibility. They need to listen to and value others' input and opinions. They need to be able to work in teams. They need to honor and respect timelines. They need to be able to communicate precisely and understand its importance in that communication. And these are all really good traits of problem solvers. Students are much better prepared to use technology than they were 15 years ago. They know about different tools such as spreadsheets and calculators and computer programs, computer algebra systems, statistical packages, all sorts of dynamic software where they're able to model and look at things from a different viewpoint. They work better in groups than they ever did before, and I think the result of that is very positive. Students learn and work better in groups than they do in a lecture type setting. They like to talk to each other, they're getting better listening to each other, and being more creative with their solutions to problems. Students and parents seem to be more worried about the grade than ever before, and achievement on tests. So cramming for tests is very typical. So things that we think should be learned and retained over time sometimes are not. So that's kind of interesting. However, and they feel like math, they've been told somewhere along the way that math is not important and they'll never use it again in their lives. However, lately I've been getting emails and talking to my past students, and they are saying, I wish I would have taken math more seriously because it allows me to make better decisions, work more efficiently, and it opens doors for better jobs and promotions. One of them is responsibility, that they have, for some reason or another, not taken the responsibility that they need to do. They need to know that there are consequences for failing a class, much more different than in high school. It could keep them from getting into a class they want to take. It could keep them from having their funding continue or their scholarships. And their first grade on that class shows up on their transcript, and it doesn't get erased by taking a class over often. They need to realize that the focus should be on learning when they go to school and not on themselves and their social lives. There won't be anybody nagging them to get up in the morning or to do their homework or to seek help. And so they have to become more adult-like, if you will, to be responsible for that particular thing.
So far we've heard a lot about the transition from one level of education to college, and now we get to hear a little bit more perspective on what the transition is like going into the workplace. So we have 5 panelists on the workforce panel. To my immediate left is Dr. Kim Armour, Director of Women's and Neonatal Health at Prentice Women's Hospital of Northwestern Medicine in Chicago, and she helps to manage over 12,000 deliveries annually, and also I found out this morning is a very active public speaker, which I was happy about. Next to Kim is Dr. Adenuga Atewologun, President of Riverland Community College in Minnesota. He's a licensed engineer, a pioneer in college and high school partnerships, an active researcher and author, and a former member of the staff here at College of DuPage. Dennis Barsema is next to Adenuga. He is a successful CEO in technology space, working previously with Burroughs Corporation, now Unisys, Paradigm, and Redback Networks, where he led a successful IPO on Wall Street. Next to Dennis is David Nickell, a licensed structural engineer and senior project manager at TGRWA, LLC in Chicago. He serves on the executive board of the Structural Engineers Association of Illinois and works with a variety of student groups across the state. And finally, we have Gus Vonderheide, Vice President of Global Sales at Hyatt Hotels and Resorts, and his team of 50 spread in 18 locations around the world generates about $1.2 billion annually. So each of you, if you could take a moment to explain a little bit about what you're seeing as people are transitioning into the workplace. And Kim, we can start with you.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you to the College of DuPage for inviting me to come back. I always love coming home. I grew up in Wheaton. My dad owned a business, so College of DuPage was somewhere that even my oldest brother, back in the early 70s when it was just getting going, attended. I would tell you that I've had an interesting course in my life. I came to the College of DuPage at the age of about, I gotta think about this, 22, 21. I had a son when I was 19, and I'm so enamored just really reflecting while I'm listening to the other panelists and the questions that are coming out of the audience. I'm a believer in stories, and I think that every person that we engage in our in cross paths within our life has a story. And as a nurse practitioner, that story has a huge impact on how we take care of them in healthcare, but it also has a huge impact on how we teach and educate. And I myself have been an educator at a university, Queen's University in Charlotte, for a couple years. And I teach every day, not only with the people I work with, but for our families and our visitors and others that come in and out of our buildings at Northwestern. I reflect back on things like raising my 3 sons who are 27, 30, and 36, and I remembered thinking, and some of it I think just innately came to me, but I remembered thinking, oh my God, this must be like fly fishing. I'm like throwing them way out into the stream, and they're on the end of my line, and I'm just letting them bob around, and all of a sudden I get a little tug, and it's like it's getting more of a tug. They must be hooked on a rock. I better pull them back in. And then I reel them back in, and we talk about it again, and we say, what's going on in life? How are you making choices? Choices always have some level of an outcome or consequence. And I remember my oldest son, Ryan, who's very successful, an attorney, saying to me one night when he was grounded for going out at 3 o'clock in the morning and stomping around the farm that was backed up to our house, and he said, Mom, do not tell me that you ever just didn't make a mistake or make a bad decision. And I smiled at him, and I was pretty young at the time. I was probably 32 or 33. And I smiled and I said, Ryan, did I ever say that I've never done that? Probably more importantly is that Grandma Meg never found out about it. And I said, the fact is, I'm your mother, and I need to teach you how to make decisions in life. And I would agree with some of our panelists. I see as a nurse practitioner and a member of many communities, a lot of our younger people today are really, I believe, somewhat caught up with societal pressures. They're concerned about what everybody's thinking of them. They're not sure how to just figure out who they are. And I think, I remember my son Kyle out at NIU. Two of my sons had the great pleasure of meeting Dennis, and my middle son, who's 30 and owns his own business. I remember when we went to see the business school, and it was the brand new Barsema business school, and all of his friends were going to Iowa, and he's like, I'm going to this brand new school. Look at all this technology. But I remember Kyle at times struggling, my younger son, and my saying to him, you'll only have yourself to answer, and knowing what the right choices are about not hurting someone physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Those are the choices you make, but be true to yourself and find the passion within yourself. And I think sometimes they get caught up with phones. He didn't answer my messages. I said, what are you doing, Kyle? Answer me, I'm calling you. He texts back to me, text me. I text and I said, answer the phone or it's going back to AT&T. And he did. But I think even their ability to communicate with us, be able to put that phone down, we are all somewhat, here I am with my phone because I'm on call and I'm covering the vice president today. We all get tied into that communication, and sometimes we have to pull ourselves back because we're so deep into the forest we forget where we're at. So I would tell you that engaging people, having relationships, opening up things to be able to build upon your strengths. I'll finish up by telling you that I went to Wheaton Central High School, and I slowly worked my way through with all three of my children to get my PhD done after having a baby at 19. And it wasn't without people opening doors, because I did love to learn, but when I was in high school, I was having so much fun, seriously, I didn't really think about college a whole lot. And my parents didn't go to college, so they weren't quite sure how to prepare me to think about that. And I think we all own that. We own that as a community of individuals to be a better community, a better state, a better nation. So I'm always available. I have a very open door policy, and anybody that needs something, I just say, just get a hold of me. I'll try to get back to you in 24 hours. It might take me a little longer. But I think students today want to learn, and we just have to find different ways to work with them about what their strengths are. I didn't like English. I hated English. So when Mr. Gore at Wheaton Central said, and the counselor said, you should take, structure the English language, I danced my way out of it saying, I'm a nurse, what do I need to know about English? Until I got to UPenn, and I had a faculty member there who I adored, Dr. Susan Jarrow. She's the dean now at Boston College School of Nursing, and Susan said, Kim, you need to write. So you're going to have to figure this out. Math, that was fine because my sister told me I was terrible at math, and the minute she told me I was terrible at math, I just pushed it right through to calculus and was over here senior year taking math. But yeah, I think that students want it. We just have to find a different way of how we engage them in relationships and excitement and a passion of which they could do the best at what they're best at.
All right, David?
Well, I'm a practicing structural engineer, and I kind of want to echo the cell phone discussion more on a technical, professional standpoint. And one of the things that we see out of our new professionals is the wanting to get to the answer before they know what the solution is, and wanting to know what the path is. And with technology, we have all these really fancy, really cool programs that could do millions of calculations in a nanosecond. And they want to build these 3D models that do all these calculations for us and say, hey, here's a really cool picture that shows this. And I think that's a great tool. However, the thing we struggle with is I ask somebody, what input did you use? Is that correct? Is it a concrete building? Should it be a steel building? Should it be a timber building? There's so many more questions you have to ask on the way to determining that final answer. And that is something that, as a professional, we challenge our people that are coming out of school to think through the process, write down the process, write down all the input, write down what you expect the output to be, and do all these checks. And I use math on a daily basis. I use my calculator on a daily basis. So having those basic concepts and using technology as a tool rather than a vehicle, I think, is really important and something I wanted to talk about today.
All right, Dennis?
Well, thank you. I've kind of failed to mention in the first panel that I, too, am a proud grad of COD, and then I went on to NIU, so I kind of followed that pattern. My mom worked here at COD as well for a number of years. This was back when we had just the Rust building, we used to call it, the building that kind of turned into rust. They said it was going to look beautiful eventually, but I'm not sure if it ever did become that. I have a unique perspective in that as a chief executive in growing companies, I've been blessed to hire a number of people. So I've been on that side of it, and now I've been an educator at Northern since 2008. So I've seen that side of it as well. And the thing that I always talk to students about is people pay you for what you're good at. Because so oftentimes we hear speakers and they stand up in front of students and they go, do what you have passion for. And I stand up in front of them and say, do what you're good at. Because that's what you're going to get paid for. If you have passion for what you're good at, then touchdown. Right? You've reached it. Right? But we don't pay for passion. We pay for you being good at something. And then we hope that you have passion for it, and that passion will take you to great heights. So how do you find out when you're a 22-year-old college student, what are you good at? Internships. And we have a unique situation at COD, we have it at Northern, that we have a working student. A majority of our students work because they help fund, if not all, some of their college, right? So they work during the summer. And I so stress to our students, do internships. Internships, every one of my sons, I have 3 sons, every one of my sons from their freshman year on did internships during the summer. And for every one of my sons, it helped them to discover what they're good at and what they've got passion for. And so we have to be encouraging our students to do internships. Now, there's a responsibility on our shoulders, right? We as educators and we as institutions have to help them find those internships. We have to have the alliances with corporations and such. Sometimes those internships are unpaid, so we have to have scholarship money, to help them to be paid. But they're not going to find out what they're good at if they're a junior in college and they're still flipping burgers at McDonald's during the summer. Because again, I talk to students about, in my companies, we always talk about create separation, right? We need to separate ourselves from our competition. So what are we going to do to create that separation? Well, you've got to think of the same thing as a student. What are you going to do to create separation? Because guess what? I talked about in the first panel, as you kind of move up the chain, the competition gets tougher. And fine, you were one of the top 10% in your high school. Welcome to the real world. There's hundreds of thousands now in the workforce that are going to be competing for jobs with you that were in the top 10% of their high school. So what are you going to do to create separation? Well, one of the big things that you can do to create separation are internships, right? And being involved on campus. So those are the things that I tend to think about. One thing that Kim talked about, which I talk a lot about as well, is encouraging students to just take time each day to think. These do our thinking for us these days. They tell us where to be, when to be, they tell us what we're going to do, and they do so much of our thinking for us. And I always encourage my kids to say, just give me 10 minutes. I'd love an hour, but give me 10 minutes to just turn all your electronics off and just think. Think about what you did well today, what you didn't do well today, what you want to do better tomorrow, your future. Just take time to think for yourself, because somebody mentioned that we get emails that start off and they say, "Hey, Dennis." And I said, in the business world, you can't send an email to somebody and say, "Hey, Dennis," right? There's a way to go about it, and their text. And I, it's as simple as I have a brilliant woman in my classes right now, and she'll sit there the entire class, and she's brilliant. She'll sit there the entire class, and she'll play with her hair. And it's as simple as going, in the business world, you can't do that. If you're in a meeting of mine and I'm the chief executive and I see one of my direct reports playing with her hair, that's not going to send a message to me that you're professional. So it's the big things, the internships, but it's the little things as well to teach our students how to be professionals.
Gus?
Thank you. So I've got a little different perspective too. I think I might be one of the few that when I graduated from here in 1982, I knew what I wanted to do. And after going through the hotel program here at COD, I was even more convinced that's the direction I wanted to go. So 33 years later, that's all I've done. I've been in the hotel business for that many years and certainly plan to live out the rest of my career doing that. I didn't go on to school after I graduated from here. I got into the program right away and then got into the workforce. And there's been times over the years that I've regretted that. I've got 2 children now who have both graduated with bachelor's degrees, and they're smarter than I am, and that's okay. But I'm real proud of them, and I'm proud of that. But it wasn't right for me at the time, and I think that's okay. But I'll tell you, I think from my perspective, first impressions still make a big play and still really carry a lot of weight when it comes to the workforce. Interview skills is something that I think that everyone needs to spend time on before they get into their first interview. And if it's an opportunity in any of the classes they take from as early on as high school, unless you're going to get into a family business or win the lottery, chances are you're going to have to interview for something in your life, right? And I tell you, I'll give a little plug to Augustana out in Rock Island. My daughter graduated from there in 2010 in elementary education, and she's now in her second year of teaching second grade in the Schaumburg School District. But they had an opportunity to bring in some teachers and some counselors and some superintendents and principals, and do some mock interviews with these kids. And Katie was so prepared to go into her first interview that she landed her first job. And I think that's really, I've given them a lot of credit for that. But they took it that serious. I agree with someone said in the previous panel that content and life skills have got to find a good balance. And I completely agree with that. There are skills learned in the books that have got to be taken into the workforce. But, social skills, flexibility, telephone skills, things that just we grew up with as boomers that were just so obvious, that's all we had. They're not skills that these kids possess today. My daughter uses the word, that would be awkward. I'm like, awkward to pick up the phone and call somebody? That's awkward? Well, it's easier to text them. I'm like, oh my God, get over yourself. Pick up the phone and make a phone call, right? I mean, and again, my concern is when she now is in the workforce, that those skills have better come. We were kind of brought up with those, and yet now we're teaching those, which seems so elementary, but they're so need to be done. Problem solving. I think someone said that you get your students together and you give them a topic and you let them beat it up together and tackle it. We do that in the workforce. We call it Hyatt thinking. And anytime that there's an opportunity that we need to come up with some solutions for, we bring some people together that aren't necessarily working together. We bring fresh minds into it that are not necessarily living that every day. And we let them beat it up for an hour. And then we let them build a prototype on what that would look like. And we walk away with some great ideas, and we've come up with some wonderful things that we've introduced as a brand through Hyatt worldwide that have come from these Hyatt thinking or critical thinking exercises. So again, if that skill set can be taught early on, I think it's a no-brainer. So a couple of thoughts for me.
All right, and finally, Nuga.
Talk about Rust building. I spent 18 years in that Rust building right here. It's good to be back at COD. I'm going to start my speech by giving you a problem to solve. Think of 5 consecutive integers that add up to 100. What are they? 5 consecutive integers that add up to 100. What are they? Well, the reason I started that way is that I'm not asking you to solve that problem because you're going to get a grade. I want you to have fun thinking about how you'll solve that problem. And having fun is all right. We need to let our students know that career is not the end. It is just a mean. Now, you don't ruin your life because you don't get an A in a course. Come and explore. Have time to discover yourself. Develop the thinking mechanism. Now, that problem I gave you, there are several ways you could solve it. You could say, well, if it asks you 100, 20 times 5 is 100. So I'm going to start with 20 as the middle. Take 1 from here, add 1 to this, take 1 from that. Or you could say 5, let x be the, or one of the number, and add 1 to it, x plus 1, x plus 2, x. But different ways to solve it. Have fun doing something like that. So my common denominator is that students should not be so much in a hurry. Why do we always rush through everything? Develop mastery and enjoy what you're doing. There is a higher reason, there is a lofty goal to what you are learning, and find that lofty goal. Then I'm going to relate that to career, because we're talking about classroom to career. What are some skills you need? Well, I think it depends on the career. That, in my mind, there aren't really obvious skills. It depends on what you want to do. I'll break it into 3 types. Do you want a career that's easily outsourced, repetitive, automated? It could be shifted anywhere. Or do you need a career that's middle ground, that could not be easily outsourced, but it's middle? Or do you need a career, do you want a career that you are most likely going to be there? The skills you need for each of that group is different. So by looking at it as a general average, I think we miss the point. We are all individuals, and we should understand that the skills you need should be kind of tied to what you really want to do. If my job is going to be, I'm going to be happy just stacking pallets, then I don't need to really know a lot of mathematics in doing that, but understand the consequences. That job could be easily automated. What happens after that? So you need to know that. So I'll close by saying this. There are 2 things businesses want, in my mind. They want you to be safe working for them, and they want to make a profit. How would you add value to that company? What is your take? What is the value you bring into the table? And find out what you need to be able to add that value. And then be safe doing it, because the companies don't want you to get in problems. They don't want you to lose your fingers while you're working for us, or otherwise there is a bit of loss of income. And remember, you're an individual. We can't treat all those students the same way. We need that individual support for them. Let them explore and discover themselves and choose a path that leads them to an end, not just a career.
So Nuga just posed 2 questions. How can a new employee, it sounded like, add value to the workplace? And how can you be safe? And I wondered if any of the panelists would like to respond to those 2 questions.
Well, I would just like to say that you made me feel great today because I answered the question correctly. Good. And I feel great about myself right now. So, can I go home?
And I'm going to say that when he asked that about the integers, the first thing I thought was, okay, I better stop and think about this. Oh my God, do I know this answer? Oh, this is a lot of pressure. And then I thought about how students feel.
Yeah.
That's how they feel. They feel if they don't have the right immediate answer for us, and in the back of my head, I'm like, I could pick this up and just Google it. And I think that that's another thing that we have to think about. I want to say, too, that when you talk about safety and the individual, so much of what we talk about in education is exactly the same things we're dealing with in healthcare. Like, I feel like I'm back at the boardroom having a discussion with all my executives and all my teams of leaders, whether they're nurses or physicians or respiratory therapists because we're challenged by so many things. We're challenged by young people coming in and not being ready to handle critical thinking. We're challenged by safety. Every morning we have an executive huddle at 8:30 and we get to hear about how many people stuck themselves with a needle, whether it was contaminated. Did we have a patient fall? Did any of the staff get hurt or injured at the same time? And these are things we deal with every single day. I think being able to separate yourself, like Dennis mentioned, is huge. And I think being able to recreate yourself over and over is a huge opportunity for any student or any individual in learning. My kids said to me when I got done with my PhD 3 years ago, they said, "Oh, for God's sake, Dad, is she done? Is she finished? Are we finished? Is she good? That's a terminal degree." And I literally looked at all of them at the table at dinner and said, "Are you kidding? If I'm not learning, I must be dead." Because every day you wake up and you learn something. Every day, if you open your mind to the possibility, there's an opportunity there to learn. And I think it's really important that we recognize that and that we foster that in reflection, which is a huge thing I learned at my PhD program. Each one of my levels of education, too, I would say, there was a learning that didn't even, in my mind, like, that's not why I thought that I was there. At UPenn, I didn't even know I was applying to an Ivy League school. Did not. I just knew they had the program I wanted, which was a maternal, fetal, or perinatal nurse practitioner, and that was the closest one for me to drive to because I was in central upstate New York and I could get there in 4.5 hours. But the irony was, at the end of the day, when I had a program director that I mentioned earlier, Dr. Susan Gennaro, and she took me kind of under her wing about why I needed to go to the writing lab and a few other things, what I realized was that I was there to learn more about people because I knew all the clinical stuff. I was already doing it. I was there to learn about people and learn about when somebody sends you a big gift and it's an uncomfortable situation, it might be wrapped in pretty, but it's really not your gift to take because it's all their problems. And that's about their story. So I think you really have to, again, separate yourself and recreate yourself. And in nursing, I can talk to you because I graduated here in 1984. In nursing, I thought teacher or nursing. I ended up a nurse. I am a teacher as a nurse. I teach every day to patients and my staff. But I recreated myself, and you know, you can add complements of things in medicine and nursing and healthcare and education and business. And I think that's the fun part, is recreating.
We have two more comments, and I'll let you go a little bit over time.
I was just going to say, the other thing that I was going to mention is that it's different today. My father retired at age 65, and when he retired, he retired. You don't see that today. You know, we don't really retire. We just move on to something different. I kind of refer to it as moving from success to significance. Right? We had success in the first half of our career, whatever that is, and however we define that, and then we find something in our life that makes us feel good about ourselves, that psychic income that we like to talk about, and we move on to that. And the students that I see today, at least the students in my classes, now I teach in the social entrepreneurship arena, so I'm teaching entrepreneurship addressing social issues in the world, like access to clean water and such. And the students today, they want jobs either where they're helping to solve a social issue in the world, or they want to work for a company that's doing good for the world. They want to be proud of who they're working for. So it's a different mentality that's coming through today. It's not just, I'm going to be driven by the dollar. In fact, there's a survey that was done by Stanford where they actually surveyed their master's students, and they were willing to take up to 20% less money to work for a company that was socially good. And I think that speaks to where we need to start directing students in terms of career pathing and such, and where companies need to be directing ourselves, and that it's not just all about profit, it's about doing good in the world.
Okay. Gus?
You asked what a student could bring to the workforce when they come in. I would say they're the patience. You know, in today's these millennials and so on, I mean, you hear this all the time. They want to be the CEO tomorrow. And from a guy who, you know, started out by stacking chairs and rolling tables, I use that all the time because I say no matter what industry you're in, you've got to start by rolling tables and stacking chairs. And the patience today is not necessarily there. I would also say flexibility, to be willing to learn different tasks within the workforce. You know, if you, let's say that you're a food and beverage guy in our business, it doesn't mean that you can't go work at the front desk or spend some time in sales. And we provide training opportunities for young people coming in that gives them an experience and a taste of all the different functions in a hotel. And there's probably 25 of them. And then we allow them to really focus in on what they've excelled at and what they enjoyed, and that's what they can make their career of. But having an opportunity to taste or sample these different ideas, it really work out well for us. So I would just say, explain to them that they're not going to walk in as CEO tomorrow, unless, of course, you're a dentist, then you might. But my point is, you got to learn the ropes, and you'll learn along the way. You'll pick up things, and you'll get life skills, and you'll learn different techniques, which will all relate and help you as you move into your career.
And Nuga, you get the last word.
I like to end by saying there is an adage that works for us in engineering or construction: measure twice and cut once. We seem to just want to rush everything. Let us take time and let our students know, take time to learn and master. Then you would only have to cut once.
Thank you very much for your comments. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists?